Welcome, everyone, to the L7C Podcast NBA edition. Today, we're going to be recapping the NBA Finals that just concluded about a week ago. And we're going to be talking some offseason. We got the NBA Draft that's going to be happening on Thursday, June 23rd, and all the things that have been going on in the association. So we have the NBA aficionado, Mr. Evan Debo. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, Martin. We've finished another year of podcast land in NBA basketball, and we've crowned a new champ, a familiar champ, but we've crowned a new champ in the Golden State Warriors, who have taken home the 2022 NBA title behind a MVP performance from Steph Curry, his first out of his 4 rings, and another season's in the books.
Yeah, so let's get right into that, Evan. You just said it, the Golden State Warriors, they won the NBA title. I know both of us, you had Boston, I think, in 7, and I had Golden State in 7. So
yeah,
this ended a game early, but let's just go right into the finals. What are things you saw, like how the series went? Just go right into it.
Man, just so much to think about. I mean, I had said way back when that I thought the winner of Milwaukee-Boston was going to take it all. Just
I agreed with you too.
You saw what you saw out of Tatum and Giannis, and this is not to discredit Golden State. I mean, because they ran the table. They didn't. Golden State Warriors in this postseason didn't trail in any series. Or sorry, did not. That's not accurate. I'm not sure where I was going back to what I thought I saw. They didn't. They hadn't trailed, but no, they had not. What I wanted to say was they haven't faced elimination. They did not face elimination once along their entire way. So there were no ties or no game 7s. There were no down 3-2 or 3-1. I mean, they kept their composure, and we saw that when they were down 2-1 early, and we thought, hey, Boston just got to string 2 games together here, and they're the NBA champs. And then something switched in the series. There's a lot of things you can point to, but I mean, Golden State would end up running the slate. So from going down 2-1, facing that 1-2 deficit, they won 3 straight. Took it in Boston's home court there. Again, there's so many different pieces of this. You had Draymond Green doing podcasts during an NBA Finals after every game, and he just was a shell of himself. Rallied and played phenomenal in Game 6. Again, that was an interesting anecdote. Jason Tatum just kind of lost steam. It too, like we were all kind of waiting for. Kept flexing his shoulder the entire series. You'd wondered, there was that tie up with Draymond where he kind of yanked him back on that injured shoulder too at the foul line too, and questioning dirty plays, those kinds of things. What's Draymond getting away with? There's so many pieces to this, Martin, but a lot of that. So the Steph Curry game, Game 4 in Boston,
Game 4, yep,
just absolutely took over. And then as you've been beating the drum all along, those Golden State third quarters, man, like what do you do when that's just coming? So I think from the Warriors' perspective, Steph Curry was phenomenal. The second best player this year will go down as Andrew Wiggins.
Yes.
He was able to do on both sides. What he was able to do on both sides of the ball, he was engaged. On offense and defense. Wasn't settling. Competed. Gave right, wrong, and different. I think there's a lot of inward things we can question about Tatum, like injury and were the lights too big kind of thing. There are a lot of data points where you can look at his first finals run for Tatum versus LeBron's against the Spurs in 2007, and the numbers are almost identical. So, is there something to be said about getting to the stage for the first time, running out of steam? You're trying to get to, those 16 wins, and it's just grueling, and they had 2 Game 7 series previously for Boston. But, I mean, a lot of that has to go to Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green just shutting him down as best you can. I mean, they're just phenomenal on the defensive end. I think Poole was hit or miss in the series. I think they got just enough out of Clay that they needed, to progress here. On the Warriors side of things for Boston, again, I think when Boston's looking into the offseason here, they need to obviously address, getting another ball handler. I think they got as far as they could with, Derek White, being that second ball handler. Marcus Smart was banged up. Tatum too, while he was phenomenal throughout this entire thing, set a playoff record with over 100 turnovers in the playoffs. 100 turnovers. This ain't a bakery. This ain't getting turnovers, chocolate turnovers at Arby's. Like this is hallowed ground when you're marching in the postseason like this. So, but none of that to take credit away from Celtics and the kind of run they had. I mean, from January on, I had this team dead in the water. I said that before, but what they were able to do, what Ime was able to get out of them, just the timeouts and the WTF he'd be saying on the sideline, like just saying, what are we doing? Just, I mean, he's the right kind of mentality to hold him accountable. But again, we're obviously at Spurs territory. I hate people making the arguments that, hey, the Warriors, since they didn't, they only did back-to-back once, they didn't do a three-peat, those kinds of things. Like 4 titles and since 2015, like says enough. Like this is Spurs echelon legacy stuff for that 3. And they were able to, reintegrate and reinvent themselves, bring in some new folks like Wiggins. And I mean, shout out to that ownership, Bob Mize and those guys. I mean, they've spent over $200 some million. If they want to try to retain these guys heading into next year, I mean, they could be pushing a $400 million payroll with luxury taxes and double taxes. The money they've spent, navigating the KD thing. I mean, if you're Durant, you help get them, eventually Andrew Wiggins, in the Russell trade and the sign and trade with Brooklyn. Like it's amazing how they're able to reinvent themselves and keep true to, those 3, despite, Clay clearly not being the same after 2 years of basketball, but still, a incredibly capable perimeter scorer. And he gained some steam and got some familiarity back on the defensive end. I think you saw as the playoffs went on for the Warriors. But just shout out to that team. And as much as I hate it, I was definitely rooting for Boston all those times with Golden State and Cleveland back to back to back to back. But those are my thoughts, Martin. How about you?
Yeah, I think obviously the game 4 really changed the thing because Boston was up 2-1. Game 4 was in their house. They win that. They're up 3-1, and this is probably going to be over. And Curry had the 43. That was his legacy finals game. A lot of people are saying he never had one, and that is the one. I think my biggest thing, too, is that on Boston, one of the more consistent players was Al Horford, which he played in his first finals. 36 years old. My problem was with as great as Boston's defense is, I don't get why they were switching Horford onto Curry on those screens. Like, I did not understand why they didn't just have him show and get back, and then the guard gets guard him. I don't know why he was staying on Curry. You have the defensive player of the year in Marcus Smart. He should have been on Curry the whole time. That was one defensive scheme I did not understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent point. I think there's tons of layers to it. I mean, there's the Warriors are how do I want to put this? There is scientific, there is nuclear physicist, is a basketball team can be schematically to free up Steph Curry. So you're combating that. And there's Mike Brown and Kenny Atkinson on the bench too, working alongside Steve Kerr to, digest how Boston attacks. The pick and roll defensively, whether they're going to show or trail or trap or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think at a certain extent, like I would want, if my big is going to get switched on 101, overplay the 3-point line and funnel them in and deal with the result. Like it's an easy thing to say, but again, I think that goes back to just, I want to give hats off to, the job that Tristan Thompson did on those switches back when the Cavs won the 16 title, because same situation, but, Thompson just had the foot speed, to kind of keep up versus, Al at his age is just doing the best he can, man. But I mean, Horford was just tremendous in this series. Time Lord too, defensively. I mean, those guys weren't why Boston lost the series by any means.
Yeah. And just to even go further with it because obviously, like Andrew Wiggins, you want to talk about a career year. I mean, he's an NBA champ. He was an all-star starter. We even got on that a little bit, how he was a starter, but he was the second best player on the championship team. He led the finals in rebounds, and he was probably one of the top two best defenders in the finals. So it's coming like, I know you just talked about the luxury tax and all that, but I don't think they have him walking away this year.
No, they gotta figure out a way to pay him. I mean, that's the problem inherently is they're gonna have to some of those big get names they're gonna have to take less or whatever, or they'll reinvent themselves again and figure it out. But Andrew just, I mean, phenomenal at staying home and not giving ground to Brown and Tatum. When Tatum's doing those back downs and again just attacking the glass, like it makes no sense how this undersized Golden State Warriors team series in and series in just keeps was able to attack the glass how they could with really just Kevon Looney as like their lone center essentially, without just, sheer will and they wanted it more. Like that's how they won this stuff. I mean, just a gritty team, especially on the defensive end when, they're giving up a lot of size and, thinking back to the Memphis series and such too, that, they were able to accomplish what they were able to accomplish and 4 titles for the Curry, Draymond and Clay combo.
Yeah, and with Kerr too, 4 titles as a coach, 5 as a player. That's 9 total titles. Looks like he potentially could catch up or get close enough to one of his other mentors in Phil Jackson. And we talked about the Spurs dynasty. That's the first thing I thought about with the Parker, Ginobili, Duncan, that group winning 5 titles, but they won 4 because I forgot. I think it was Tony who got, or was it Manu who got drafted after they already won 1? But neither here nor there. But the Duncan Pop won 5. The Curry,
I believe it was Manu.
Yeah, who got drafted after. Yeah, because Duncan won 1 in 97. No, it was early
99,
and they beat the Knicks
with Robinson.
Yep. So this is crazy, man, because I didn't think I'd see something like the Spurs and the consistency. Obviously, Duncan, they made the playoffs every year. He really never got hurt. Curry, they got hurt a couple of years ago. And Steph Curry said, you guys do not want to see us next year. And to say that and then win the title is just amazing. And then also seeing how the Warriors kept receipts about everyone who said their franchise was done. They weren't going to win a title anymore. They couldn't win without Kevin Durant.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to bring that up too, especially with Clay dogging, Memphis. And, again, I'm excited to see that series progress. Like, that'll be fun hopefully for years to come if they get matched. Even regular season, I think you're going to see some techs and flagrants and ejections and stuff too. I mean, Clay ain't one to shy away from, comments, but I mean, when the team wins championships and backs them up, like it is what it is. Like, I think back to 15 when he said, I guess you're just gonna, whatever, cry about it, whine about it, or whatever he said about LeBron, and they end up losing. And I remember just how infuriating that was to hear this kinds of things. But that's good motivational stuff for the gym poster, for Grizzlies and everything else. But they absolutely are keeping receipts now.
Oh yeah,
it's so many different things.
So yeah, because also with John Morant saying that they want the Christmas game against the Warriors, he wants the NBA people to make it happen. I was like, well, I mean,
I love it.
I love it too. So to go back to Steph Curry, a lot of talk. Obviously, he had the 3 titles before this, no Finals MVPs. 2 were Durant, 1 was Andre. Now he wins his 4th title.
That Andre one should not have happened.
It is what it is. We can't change the past.
LeBron averaged 40, like it was 39 or 40, 12 and 9.
He averaged a triple-double.
And he won it for but it was mostly at the time his you're saying Andre averaged a triple-double?
No, LeBron did.
Oh yeah. I mean, especially if you round up, I think you were there. But like,
Yeah.
he won it. He won the Finals MVP for his quote unquote defensive efforts on LeBron. Like Curry deserved that. That was not fair. Speaking of Iguodala, I think we've seen the theatrics with him entering the game in the blowout. There towards it, not blowout, but the size of the lead at the end and final waning minutes of the last game that. We've probably seen the last of Andre Iguodala, I think, in the NBA. Never say never. It's always that, hey, let's overpay a bench role kind of thing.
He also has 4 titles.
Also has 4 titles. Consummate pro role player. Just was somebody so hard to scheme against. On the defensive end. When the Cleveland was playing in the finals. Year in and year out, that, I mean, he was a threat to shut your water off, and just found a rhythm and was a huge part of where they're at now. Just shout out, if this is the end, shout out to Andre, and excited to see, I could see him being obviously a guy who can't walk away from the game, being the James Jones front office type, or, something like that. There's a reason why these guys are glue guys. They're character guys that, can hold people accountable, and, can also, instill their knowledge and wisdom and, everything else in the young players in terms of scouting, in terms of development, those kinds of things that, I don't think this is the last seen of him. But if it is a career, he's been a pleasure to watch, as an opposing fan.
Right. So with Curry too, so players to win 4 championships and at least 2 regular season MVP awards. You have Kareem, now you have Steph, you have Tim Duncan, you have LeBron. You have Magic, you have MJ, and you have Bill Russell. This year, Curry won the inaugural Western Conference player or whatever that award. I think it's dumb, but it is what it is. He won the All-Star MVP.
Rebrand.
And he won the Finals MVP. So, Evan, the big talk recently now is if Steph Curry is a top 10 player in history, currently on the top 75 that came out this year on the 75th anniversary. He was at 16 on the ESPN. So what do you like? Do you think he's top 10? Like, who would you take off? Like, what are you thinking? And I can read you the top 10 if you. I can read you the top 10 too if you need it. I have it right up.
Yeah, let me see who I can rattle off. So MJ, LeBron.
Yep, that's 1 and 2.
Kareem,
3.
Bill.
Bill is 6.
Bill is 6.
Mm-hmm.
Kobe.
Kobe is 10.
Right at 10, and that's the discussion. Again, it's would you knock Kobe out for Curry? I've seen a couple different places. Hakeem on there? No.
Hakeem is number. See, that's the other thing too. Hakeem is 13. Like, there's people in front of Curry who I would. I'm just waiting for you to guess the top 10.
Yeah, he's close. Read me the few I'm missing. I assume Shaq.
Okay.
Shaq's in there or no?
Yeah. So you had Michael and LeBron 1 and 2. Kareem was 3. Magic Johnson is 4. Wilt Chamberlain is 5. Bill 6. Bird 7. Tim Duncan 8. Oscar Robertson 9. Kobe 10. And then the people ahead of Steph Curry: Shaq 11, Durant 12, Hakeem 13, Julius 14, Moses Malone 15, Curry 16. A lot of people I've seen have on ESPN and all that have taken out Oscar or potentially Wilt and inserted Curry in the top 10. But I'm going to be honest, man, I don't think that prime Curry is better than prime Shaq or Durant. I just don't.
Yeah, it's tough. Like, these are the things we all enjoy at the 4th of July cookout, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on Christmas Day is having these debates and comparing the accolades, and everything else. Like I don't know. I struggle with Oscar for what he meant to the game. On so many different levels, the triple doubles. You're talking a 12-time all-star, 9-time NBA All-First Team, 6-time NBA assist leader, but 1 MVP and 1 title.
Yeah.
Like, he's got to drop. He's got to drop for me. You're right. I think on the Durant and Shaq things are fair. I still have Shaq in my top 10. Like, if you're swapping them, I'm putting Shaq in the top 10, and I've got Curry right on the door ahead of Durant.
As a resume, right?
Yeah, okay. On the resume. Okay. And like, too, if you look at it in the bigger context, like Michael, let's look at people who fundamentally changed how we play basketball. Michael Jordan, and back to the David Halberstam breaks of the game about sorry, wrong book, but the Jordan rules. With Michael Jordan, again, just how he changed the game with the hand check fouls to how you had to officiate Shaq, which, set up, how we treat big men nowadays. Again, and just, how we officiate the Dwight Howards and the Joel Embiids and everything else. That Curry's in that same spot in terms of, like, I think he gets an extra percentage or push because of how he's weaponized the 3-point line and best shooter of all time. Like, I think he's knocking on the door for sure. I don't have him ahead of Bean just yet, but I mean, I think, and that's scary to talk about and think, and especially with Kobe no longer with us, like, you don't want to posthumously hurt his legacy, like, after his death, like, kind of thing. You feel like you are having this conversation, but what Steph Curry's done, right, wrong, and different, is very real. How he's changed the game. The rings are starting to pile up. The accolades are starting to pile up, and I think he's opened the door, and he's in the room. He might be 15 feet away, but and a long way to go, but I think he's getting ready to open the door, or he's got a foot in.
Yeah, because I don't necessarily think you have to knock, like, Kobe. Like, so if Oscar is 9 and Kobe's 10, if you take Oscar out and you move Kobe to, like, 9, then you have that 10th spot with, like, a Shaq, Durant, Curry. There have been
and I've got Shaq in there too.
Yeah, so I would have Shaq as well. But what do you think about the people who talk about, like, Wilt, that he only won 2 titles, and with all the scoring accolades and all of that, he only got the 2 titles because another guy on this top 5, 6, Bill, was killing him. So what do you think about people saying maybe Wilt needs to be down a bit just because of the resume part, not the individual stats part?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that's fair, and if that's the case, I mean, I think there's a compelling case here where Curry is in top 10, and you could bump Wilt back. I mean, if you look at it, at a certain point, we're going to get to a spot where you got to have some automatic qualifiers in here. I think it's got to be, X amount of rings. I mean, did Bird have 4?
Bird had 3, but he was going against Magic Johnson, and they were trading. And then obviously his career got cut short. Because
we might get to a spot where, hey, top 10, to be in the top 10, you got to have 4 rings. Like, we might well be in that conversation at a certain point. The way things keep progressing and everything else, where, hey, it's clear cut. Like, to enter the top 10 club, the first rule of the clubhouse is you got to have 4 rings, and then we go from there. How did you change the game? What did you do on the court, off the court? How did we change the game because of it? The individual accolades obviously are going to be the next highest thing after championships. But, again, because they have to go hand in hand. Otherwise, you've got Steve Kerr with however many, and Big Shot Bob with, 7 more rings, and he knows what to do with. So,
yeah, because with the Bird thing, obviously, Bird and Magic still have the highest rated college basketball game of all time, and they revitalized the NBA when we were we weren't alive, but when the NBA was in a slump in the 80s, without them, they bring it back. Michael in the 90s, then we got the Kobe, Shaq, LeBron. Like you said, era changers. And then someone who really didn't change anything, but it's just a born, like Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan's won Ray Allen 3 for being 6-0 in the finals. But that is just an interesting discussion that's going to be continuing on. And if Curry wins another one next year, then the discussion's really going to ramp up.
We're gonna pop up. We're gonna pop up considerably.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's still got time, man. I mean, I have until some fundamental things happen with LeBron James situation that I mean, Curry's got a better chance of getting the fifth than LeBron does until I see something different.
Yeah, and that's also what people bring up with the LeBron thing is now both of them have 4 titles, which is kind of crazy that the kid Steph Curry, for people who've been watching basketball for so long, most of his early years was derailed by the ankle injuries. If people forget that, like he was hurt a lot because of those ankles. From that to 4 chips, and he has 4, LeBron has 4. You got people like KD who has 2 who's still there in the league. Giannis still there. The NBA, like there's some champions around here.
Back to Curry. You know, every time he wins the title, I feel like the story resurfaces of legend that the Warriors flat out denied that. You know, with all the ankle injuries and everything else, you know, early on in the career, that they had offered Steph Curry to Milwaukee for number 1 overall pick Andrew Bogut, and the Bucks turned it down. Is allegedly the legend. And the Warriors will deny it and say, "Hey, we never ever said that, or never tried to move him." I mean, again, like those are the things that come with it. I mean, you know, again, like even the Bulls, you know, with Pippen and everything else, how many years later were we before we found out? You know, again, just I mean, obviously he did get moved, but you know, again, just how earlier on the struggles were with, you know, do we move pieces? Do we not move pieces? Those kinds of things, and who's happy and who's not. So, Martin, I think that's a good dovetail. We'll put a stamp at the end of this one for the Golden State Warriors, the NBA champion, Golden State Warriors. And as you said, tomorrow's the draft. We put we're really in the height of the off season and the season that never ends, right, of NBA basketball. But before we get to the draft, because I got a lot of ground to cover there, we've got a number of off-season things. And speaking of players not happy, Kyrie Irving in Brooklyn.
He's become a mainstay on this podcast.
Kyrie Irving doesn't seem to be too happy that the Brooklyn Nets don't want to give him a long-term deal. We've talked about this enough from the ground. You got to show up for work, man. If I'm Brooklyn, I can't go to bed at night giving him a long-term deal, like more than 2 years kind of thing. But there's been some crazy stuff floated. Like I've heard people like speculating, like, okay, like it's been rumored he's like, and he has publicly come out and said, basically, I didn't handle myself well, you know, during that championship year with Cleveland, and that's been well documented, especially in the playoffs. Like he was a recluse, would not talk to anybody. He'd show up and he'd play basketball. He was not a team player, anything that he's come out since and said that, you know, he's regretted that. But I feel like there's some stock in even though there's like almost something absurd would need to happen. But I feel like there's some stock in are he and LeBron trying to reunite kind of conversation? I've read that a couple different places. He would need to like turn down $30 million, opt out himself, which he has until about the middle to end of next week to decide on. And then he could sign for the Lakers, I think baby mid-level, about $6 million, which is nothing. But like that would be absurd, but never expect anything with Kyrie Irving, right? Martin, yeah. What are your thoughts? I think we all know the obvious on, dude, just play basketball, play in more than a third of your games in 2 years, all those things. But like, what does Brooklyn do in this scenario? Are they right to hold out, in your opinion, and weigh whether or not Kevin Durant, you know, reconsiders his long-term investment in the team? You also have a giant paperweight in Ben Simmons you don't know what to do about. It's been rumored it's been reported Kyrie, after Steve Nash practices, would try to have his own practices with the team. Martin, just shoot, man.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing, if I'm an organization from a financial thing. I do not give him the long-term deal. I still would re-sign him because, I mean,
Martin, I need to interrupt. I'm sorry.
oh, go ahead.
We need to find some NBA baby steps here with Dave Ramsey. Baby step one, got to be don't give Kyrie Irving the max.
Yes.
Don't give Kyrie Irving long-term money after 2022. Do not do it. That's baby step one in NBA money. All right, continue.
Yeah, that's actually very, very clever. But yes, you don't give him the long term because, I mean, the dude has not played 60% of the total games in the past couple of years, obviously with injury and not being vaccinated and all of that. But still, I mean, this Nets thing so far has been a failure. They've only won one playoff series. And obviously they're like one size. If Kevin Durant's foot was a size 12, they beat the Bucks. But hey, that's basketball. But this year, if people don't remember, they're the only team in the playoffs that got swept. Only team. So it's one of those things too, and we've joked about it on here, but it's become a serious thing. Like, he just hasn't been showing up to work. He hasn't. It's been either one thing or another, or not getting vaccinated, but then going to maskless parties and get in trouble with that in the height of COVID. I don't give him the long-term deal. I do give him a deal, though, because Kevin Durant went there because of him. So if you run the risk of getting Kevin Durant mad and then losing KD potentially, because that's just the era we're in with the NBA players, if you get them mad, they want to leave your team, then your whole thing was a waste of time. So I do think you sign Kyrie so Kevin stays. The whole Ben Simmons thing, I don't even have the time for that because we have to actually see him moving to see what that could be. And I just want to go to the Lakers thing too. They've talked about that reuniting, all that stuff. I want Lakers fans to actually remember this. Y'all are not getting like Kyrie for like free, and y'all can't afford him, like you already said with the Evan thing. And people would have to get traded. Obviously, I think their biggest thing would be Russell Westbrook. And people are like, oh my gosh, can you imagine if Westbrook and Durant reunite? I was like, that's not going to work. So Lakers fans need to pump the brakes. They don't have the assets to trade. They would have to give up a lot of stuff. But I just feel like it's one of those things like Kyrie wants a long-term deal. They don't want to give it to him. Now we're at a standstill. And whenever Kevin Durant steps in, that's when this will get done.
I think that's a good point. I mean, if Kevin Durant says I'm peacing if you don't give him long-term money,
then it's going to happen.
He will. I think Kevin sees it too, but I just really don't see that. I agree that would happen, but I don't see Kevin doing that. No, I don't know. It's such a weird spot. We'll see how that unfolds. I still think there's some crazy way that this cat declines his option a week from today and sees what else is out there and isn't not I got to be within my own truth enough is the famous phrase from Cleveland to say, hey, money's not everything. I'm going to sign for $6 million in the mid-level with the Lakers.
Evan, I do want to ask you something, though, because this is a thing where even for the common workspace that we're in, when does the headache outweigh the talent? Because we have done this before we even had the L7C podcast. We've talked about Kyrie almost once every 4 years like it's a college. He wanted to leave LeBron because he didn't want to be the little brother, went to Boston, had that whole thing in the Boston thing like, oh, if you'd have me, I'd like to stay. Then he leaves that, goes to Brooklyn. Now we're doing it all over again. Like, when is the headache just outweigh the talent? Like, you know what, man?
All right.
We don't want to deal with this anymore.
Martin, this is not, I do not condone this video. It's chauvinistic. It's sexist. It's completely satirical and a comedy. But it's an old video on YouTube. I'm about ready to drop. I'm sure you've seen it. Again, I do not condone any of this whatsoever. It's completely satire and comedy, but there's that video of the crazy hot scale. Are you familiar with it?
Yep, I am.
So for the listeners, the crazy hot scale, some comedic guy gets up there and talks about, again, like he has a chart up there, completely satirical, has a line that goes up. It talks about, hey, as somebody's measures of attractiveness go up, on the right side, like where they go across the horizontal part of the graph. As they go up, like also their craziness increases. And if you don't settle for the fringes on either side, somewhere in there is your life zone. So I think we've had a lot of people, and you can flip it and say, hey, same thing with husbands and everything else on crazy hot scale, or immature hot scale, like whatever, if we're playing stereotypes in dating culture. But you're exactly right. I mean, that's Kyrie Irving to a T. Like, it's satire, but like to a certain extent, like here, like Kyrie Irving is a wizard on the basketball court like we've never seen. I'll never, ever see anybody dribble a basketball like that man can. I'll never see the man scientifically diagnose a piece of glass to kiss the ball off of for bank shots and angle shots and floaters. And the dude can just shoot the lights out and cross you up and break your ankles. Like, some crazy Rucker Park stuff. But at a certain point, you're right. It's not worth the headache. It's not worth the headache. Like, and I think we'll start to see that, I think, in the market. I think you'll see some, as his career plays out, I hope he comes to his senses, but we've been saying this for how many years? Like, Bill Simmons said it on a podcast today about, like, the man absolutely, when the chips were down, was a bad dude in the 16 finals, hitting that shot and everything else. And he's been going out to dinner since and not done anything. He's been going out to dinner since on that billing of that Game 7 shot and hasn't had to do anything or put in the work for anything else. So I think you're exactly right. That's a long analogy to say that I don't think he's worth the headache.
Yeah, I mean,
I just certainly don't want him in Cleveland. If the Cavs had the ability to sign him right now, I don't want him.
I don't think they're looking that way, but we're gonna have to wait and see. Maybe there'll be some moves on the draft tomorrow, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. I'm also waiting for the thing like where last time where Russell Westbrook heard that the Rockets wanted to get rid of him, he's like, all right, I want out. Is he going to do the same thing with the Lakers? They're hearing these rumors. He's like, I'm not even going to wait for the rumors. I'm just going to get out of here. But
yeah, I don't know.
But then who would want Russell?
There's so many layers. Yeah, there's so many layers to it. I feel like there's been tons of, I think when he was in DC too, but definitely now, like, what's with this Charlotte buzz with Russell? I don't get it. And I know Charlotte wants desperately, and maybe they'll figure a way to do it. I've heard rumors of they'll use the 13th or 15th pick around the Cavs tomorrow night in the draft to do it. But they definitely have buyer's remorse about Gordon Hayward and want to move him. There's been some discussion of, like, can a Hayward and Westbrook thing work its way out? Also, you've got John Wall just out in limbo making $48 million a year in Houston, who Houston won't play. He just opted into his final year of his deal. But, I mean, like, I feel bad for John Wall. Like, John Wall didn't do anything to deserve this. Like, it's just, like, and he averaged 21 and 10 his last year in the league with Russell Westbrook. His last year playing, and he has no fault of his own. He's been told that, hey, you can't, like, we're not going to play him, man. Like, you're not a part of the plan. You're just something for us to eat salary on, and we got all these picks and, yada, yada, yada. But, like, we've got a few immovable deals here that can you move the cups around and put, like, if you're the Lakers, I don't know quite how it would work mathematically, but, like, I thought, all right, let's swap and let's get John Wall in here and let's have Westbrook just sit the pine for Houston if that's how it pans out, those kinds of things. There's so many things to move there, but Martin, speaking of moving, we got to move this podcast along. But a couple other off-season notes before we touch base on the draft. So Warriors assistant Kenny Atkinson originally took the Charlotte Hornets job.
Yep.
Allegedly. And then it was like, Woj tweeted out, I think over the weekend, like, actually, it turns out since they won the title, the ink wasn't dry, and he's not going to take that job. I've read some places where and I haven't done the due diligence fact checking on cap numbers and stuff, but that historically Charlotte hasn't spent money on assistants. Kenny was led to believe that Jordan and the ownership group would pony up to help him put together a good staff, and that was why he backed out. I've read family reasons, that Charlotte has historically been bottom 5 in the league in paying assistants. Charlotte's in a tough spot, and I think they're going to end up hiring like 80-year-old Mike D'Antoni, because he was the other finalist essentially. So I think they're getting ready to do that. I don't know how much faster Charlotte can play, because Lonzo's just whipping the ball literally literally horizontally across the court. That's been an interesting piece. We've seen a number of player movements already, folks opting out of contract. The 76ers apparently want to move off Matisse Thybulle to give 3 years and $30 million to PJ Tucker, who opted out of Miami. You're going to pay $10 million a year to PJ Tucker at 40. Like, what is going on, Martin? It's madness.
Yeah, I agree. And it's also crazy too, because Charlotte, not this year, but last year they were in the play-in games. So it's not like they're too far off in the East, but it's like they need to.
And so I mean, they'd have to move that contract. So speaking of things I expect tomorrow is, I think there's they have to figure out a way to move the Gordon Hayward deal, because they have to pay Miles Bridges. They have to, and Miles Bridges is going to command near max money. So that's something that I would not be surprised if you see him attached to a pick or several picks or something to get off of him, get off of that deal, so they can free up some more money to offer. They also need some size in the front court. They might address that in the draft. We'll see. Right before we hopped on, Martin, had been floated as maybe the Cavs were interested in this target, but Portland has now acquired Jeremy Grant for a 2025 Minnesota pick. That's when it conveys 2025 from Detroit. So Detroit's got $44 million in cap space now. That magically becomes a DeAndre Ayton max money deal that the Suns won't match. The Suns this whole time have been like, all right, man, go find it on the market. Nobody's willing to pay a back-to-the-basket center max money, even if you were really big. But he looked disinterested last year. We've talked about the Gobert-Ayton swap and, again, where those players might move. But, I think there's fast and loud noise for him to Detroit now. For the Cavs, they're in an impasse with Colin Sexton, who feels like, hey, my minimum number should be $20 million a year. And the Cavs are like, you're a restricted free agent, go get it somewhere else. And now magically Detroit up the road could have money to sign him and see if the Cavs will match, which could handcuff us a little bit financially for years to come. But those have been the latest movements. Martin, any comments on those, or anything else has popped up that you've seen or haven't seen before we touch draft?
No, I think D'Antoni will be announced the coach tomorrow.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think he'll be announced tomorrow. Dominoes will fall. I don't know if there's going to be any big trades, but we're going to have to wait and see.
Well, let's polish off and end the pod on the NBA draft. So I've texted you a little bit over the last couple of days. So the Cavs have the 14th pick. No surprise for those of you who listen to the podcast that we're highly invested in the Cavs, being Ohioans, and especially me, hoping I can be a GM one day, which is never going to happen, of my beloved Cleveland Cavaliers. But
never say never.
Never say never. Never say never. But they're the 14th pick in the draft. Martin, I feel like, so if we're just kind of talking about storylines for this draft, I think there's debate at the top on what the Magic are going to do at number one between Auburn's Jabari Smith Jr. or, Chet Holmgren, who coming this season, Chet was going to be the piece. Chet is just a freak on so many different levels. He's obviously really thin, played at Gonzaga. He's got such great instincts defensively that, he's not Evan Mobley defensively, but he has Evan Mobley type length and instinct that make him a rare piece. I think that's still up in the air. I will find it hard pressed to think that the Magic aren't going to go with Jabari, but that's still in discussion. And I think pretty much, again, whoever the other doesn't take, the Thunder are going to take, or whoever the Magic doesn't take, the Thunder are going to take. And then Paolo Banchero is going to go number 3. Honestly, to me, I think Paolo is the best player in the draft right now. I think hands down. He's just so polished. He reminds me of, you'll go through and people will do comparisons to different pieces, and every player is their own. But I see a lot of really, really agile. I don't know. I see elements of Carlos Boozer in him. I see elements of Chris Webber in him. I think he's definitely more mobile. He's way better offensively than Carlos Boozer was, at prime Utah years and everything else. I just think he's the best player in the draft. Not to say that, again, and that's why you swing, take a swing on Chet and Jabari and say, hey, we project based on his size and age and everything else that we think he's going to be the best player 5 years from now. And how many times do we see that, where the best player today is the best player 5 years from now? But I think they're pretty much locked into that top 3 with, Jaden Ivey going at 4, and the Kings have been getting tons of calls about, the Purdue shooting guard from there. And, Jaden's a heck of a piece, too. I know the Knicks would love to somehow find a way to get him. I've read a bunch of places. But I think those are top 4, and what happens from 5 on, who the heck knows, Martin? I know you've been following this. Do you feel the same way with the top 4, that those are the 4? It's not going to change, then after that, it's a crapshoot?
No, after that's going to be a crapshoot. My thing with Chet, though, is that if he was just, because he's under 207 foot, if he was 20 to 30 pounds heavier, I don't think this would be a discussion. He'd be the clear-cut number 1 pick. I
don't think so either. Average 14 a game last year on 41% shooting, 9.6 boards, and the 3.6 blocks. Just phenomenal shot blocking ability. He's long, he's rangy. He's just got such good defensive instincts. But yeah, his frame hurts him because while the size there, and nobody saw that too, where big centers would just kind of dog him in the post. But I think I think you're exactly right there, that there's just again, just a weight issue there. But any thoughts on Jabari?
I mean, I watched a lot of Auburn just because I like Bruce Pearl, because when he used to coach Tennessee, my favorite college basketball player, Chris Lofton, was on that team. So I followed Bruce Pearl around. But I don't know if he's a transformational type player, quote unquote, but I do feel like he is a good number 1 pick. I kind of feel the same way that we did. I think we did. Yeah. The Anthony Edwards one, and Anthony Edwards turned out all right. So I feel like that same way. I'm not head over heels, but I'm oh no, he's good. He's probably going to be the number 1 pick. But Anthony Edwards has turned out really good so far. We saw him in the playoffs.
He might well end up being the best player from that draft. I mean, he's full steam ahead and just, phenomenal. The run he had in the postseason, his first postseason. Martin, if we string out the next few picks heading up to the Cavs here, so you've got Benedict Mathurin from Arizona. You've got Keegan Murray. There's some discussion about Keegan Murray potentially going 4 ahead of Jaden Ivey. I just don't see it. The wild card of the draft is Shaedon Sharpe. Highly recruited out of high school, and then essentially didn't play at Kentucky for one reason or another. Again, he's got all the tools necessary, and we've seen this before where folks get into the wrong college program and stuff, and then they surprise us. We say, hey, maybe you should have paid more attention to high school tape, and sometimes it's about fit. I mean, how many times do we, see it go both ways? I think about Cam Reddish coming out of high school, bad fit, and, he's really struggled in the NBA. And then we've also seen the opposite end of the spectrum where, a guy like Shaedon Sharpe could kind of come out of nowhere. So Shaden could go really high. Somebody could, take a flyer on him and see, hey, I think we could potentially find our next Anthony Edwards, kind of in hiding here, or he might be a bust. But I mean, he is the biggest wild card across the board, I think, with so many draft experts. Another name to look at in terms of this 5 to 10 range, two names actually. Dyson Daniels. I'm really, really high on him. Like I would love if there's a way to somehow trade up and not give up a lot of assets, but you have to go feature first if you're trying to get in the top 10 and trade up. Because nobody wants the 14th pick for the Cavs. But Australian guard, heck of a defender. He's got to work on his jump shot a little bit, but really, really had a big growth spurt, to get to 6'6", 6'7", phenomenal. Another giant wild card is, have you been following Ousmane Dieng's rise in the NBL a little bit?
I am not as much.
So I struggle with him, and a lot of draft folks struggle with him too. He's 6'10". Like you get Michael Porter vibes, but then for me, I'm like, there's times where, so he had an atrocious start to a season, like in the NBL. And obviously that's tough for an 18-year-old, moving to a different country, starting, you're living away from home. Like I think about us our freshman year of college, and you're like, you're supposed to produce in, 8 months of basketball and set yourself up for what people are going to think about you long-term as an investment. Like that's a lot of pressure, but people do it. Luka does it, everything else. But, there's like vibes with his frame and everything else. So I think people say he projects really well. His shooting came back a little bit towards the second half of his NBL career in the New Zealand League. I also get a lot of Kevin Knox vibes. I hate to say it. So like some people are saying, and that's a big swing, right? So he's the testament of the high ceiling, low floor guy. But if he's not Kevin Knox, he handles the ball phenomenally. Great pick and roll guy. Just a lot of questions there. I would struggle if I'm the Cavs. Like the Cavs could take a fly on him if he were to fall to them and be like, hey, we're not going to push him along. We're going to develop him. We're in a great spot with where our team's at. We're almost in the playoffs last year if it weren't for injuries, yada, yada. And then Martin, probably like the most like Tyrese Halliburton-like player I see in this draft is Wisconsin's Johnny Davis. So obviously an older player, absolutely can score the ball at all three levels. Particularly the mid-range game is where he cuts his jib, so to speak. But he's just phenomenal in terms of scoring the basketball, and he competes defensively. For a 6'4.5" guard, just at such a high level. So from there, you've got Jalen Duren, big from Memphis. Jeremy Sohan is kind of the Andre Iguodala type player in this draft that everybody just is in love with, but really can't shoot. The Baylor guy came and defended all 5 positions, in the title game. You got AJ Griffin and Ochai Agbaji, and that's kind of rounding out the top 14, 15, along with center Mark Williams, Tari Eason. Martin, there's a lot of players, again, that have popped up casually. I think they've done a due diligence. They've done a good job at keeping everything quiet. And that's good respect around the league when people call you, right? For trades of like, hey, can I run this by you without it getting out or leaked? And that's how people are more prone to do deals and stuff. They know they can trust you. But, I think AJ Griffin's going to go a little bit higher, but there's been a lot of injury concerns with him, even though he's such a phenomenal shooter and just like, looks like he's cut out of marble. I mean, physically. I know you've watched probably some more Duke ball than you have, for sure, for Ousmane Dieng. But what are your thoughts on AJ Griffin?
So currently right now projected would go to Washington, I think, which this comes up every freaking year. I think that'd be a really good pick for them if Bradley Beal leaves, because then you quote unquote have his replacement at a cheaper deal and you could try and build off of him and Porzingis. But I mean, the dude can shoot. I mean, he's a playmaker. He would fit on that Washington team. I mean, obviously you can't teach height too, like being 6'6", 222, 6'11" wingspan. He's still a big boy. He doesn't even turn 19 till training camp in August. So I think he could be a steal like in this draft for the Wizards, who it's just the Wizards. I just don't know if Bradley Beal finally leaves or goes to Miami or all of that. So if they have Bradley Beal and him, maybe they're a fringe play in if Bradley Beal leaves, and then they're just gonna be a building block here for him. But I do want to go, since we are pressed for time, on our Cavaliers, who you are in a dilemma on who you want them to take at the 14th pick.
I am. And just as we're talking here, like I've gone back and forth so many times, man. Like so the Cavs drafting needs, and they've got 2 seconds, and who knows on seconds. Of note, there's 2 less seconds this year because of tampering with the Miami Heat and the Milwaukee Bucks. So I hate that hurts kids, Martin. That, hey, like, this is, you work your entire life to be one of 60 picks every year, and there's going to be 2 less kids who get that opportunity now. Like, take the 2 picks and say, hey, we're going to designate these as, like, I don't know, like picks that, hey, you get drafted and you immediately go into, you know, the G League Ignite or something. You know, I don't know what that looks like, but like, I just hate that hurts kids, Martin.
Yeah.
On a side note, but so the Cavs have 2 extra seconds. They need a backup point guard. You know, Ricky Rubio, I think it's the worst kept secret in the league that he wants to come back, but he wouldn't be available to December. So how do you get there? Do you triage and hope you can, you know, my turn, your turn with Sexton at the point, helping out a little bit here and there. The Cavs need a backup point guard. They need a backup center. They had to start Moses Brown off the basically the waiver wire, you know, when we had some injuries to our front court. So then you address those things. We talked about, I think it'd be cool to have Isaiah Mobley in. I don't know that he will get drafted, but I'm sure he would absolutely want to sign with his brother's team and play for our summer league squad, and who knows from there to see. But the biggest need, and I'll leave this for last, is, you know, obviously you've got a giant LeBron James size hole that, you know, this franchise has longed to fill whenever he's not with us. And I think too, like, you've got a lot of guys that are like tweener 2 threes. Like, there's not like a whole bunch of budding 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" players out there that aren't, you know, forwards and stuff too. Now, granted, like, so at 14, there's a couple players that I'll say no brainer, regardless of fit, I want if they fall to me. So in that category, which I don't expect these 2 players to be there, but are Dyson Daniels, at 6'6", 6'7", and guard Johnny Davis. If any of those players are there at 14, you have to take them. That's where I'm at right now, and that's not necessarily fit. That's based on talent. I think you figure it out from there. Like, look at, like, if Johnny Davis ends up being your Jordan Poole, where you have a 3-guard rotation, and you know, I think that's fine. Other folks, more realistic, that I think, hey, when you start talking about wings, I don't expect Jeremy Sohan to go that far, but I can't, for as good a defender as he is, we already have an Isaac Okoro, and who can't shoot, and we need people who can put the ball in the basket. I think my next person, Martin, if he's available there at 14, and as I'm seeing here, he might fall. I think I would take a flyer on AJ Griffin. You know, again, he's just got such a good perimeter shot, your typical 3-and-D guy. He's long, he's physical. I think he would work well. You know, being able to funnel guys into the, you know, if they get past him with like a foot speed into Mobley and Jared Allen in the post. The name that's been linked with the Cavs, I think, the most heavily is Ochai Agbaji from Kansas. He's only 6'4.5", but he's got like something crazy, like a 7-foot wingspan, which, you know, helps a little bit defensively. You know, there's been some comps to Jay Crowder, Dorian Finney-Smith. Like, I think the Cavs would make it work, and he can put the ball in the basket too. But, like, the other 2 names that I think don't be surprised tomorrow if you hear them, if all the players I mentioned are off the board. Tari Eason of LSU, I'm really high on. He's just a brute force in the paint and attacking the basket, and then defensively in the passing lane and stuff too. he's been a part of that giant LSU team that, they fired their coach for, improper benefits to players on a tapped FBI reporting call back with the casino, busts and everything else. So he's a name to watch out for. Just, didn't quite have a crazy eye-popping season in LSU, but, in his sophomore year made a huge jump. And then Jalen Williams from Santa Clara, very much in that Anthony Davis role where it was, hey, I'll sign on to Santa Clara. I'm a 6'2" shooting guard or 6'2" point guard. I handle the ball all the time. And then Martin, he just grew like Anthony Davis. Like when he originally committed to Cleveland State and decommitted, when he was a point guard and just hit that growth spurt. Average 18 points, 4 assists, primary ball handler and facilitator from the small forward role, and just kind of a jumbo point guard that I think that's a guy you could stick in and help facilitate the offense. That, hey, can you find your small forward of the future and your kind of backup facilitator to Darius Garland? I think it well could be Jalen Williams. So who knows? I'm going to talk myself into anybody tomorrow, Martin. But I think there's a lot of good options available in years where there's, not always, great potential after the top 5 picks.
Yeah, I agree with all the things you said too. Is also not even in regards to the picks, but where the Cleveland.
We talked about Malachi Branham.
Yeah, who I think that's who they're going to take. I do think they're going to take Malachi, Ohio State kid, even though I was still a little weary because it was just like this. He had that spurt in the second half of the season where everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is a lottery pick. Like he wasn't like consistent all like that, but then he had that spurt and then here we are. But the more exciting thing for me with the Cavs pick is that it's the 14th pick and Cleveland is in a really good spot. If you've listened to this podcast, before the injuries, we were a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. And I think we would have stayed in the top 6 if we did not have all those injuries. And we were limping into the play-in game. We almost took out Brooklyn in Brooklyn without our full team. So it's, again, exciting at that point to be a Cavaliers fan because you're going to get all these people healthy again. You got another year under your belt. You experienced playoff basketball because we almost took out Brooklyn. We had the game against Atlanta. So this pick could be another piece that pushes us forward past play-ins and just directly in the playoffs. So that's what I'm more excited about. But I think we're taking Malachi. Buckeye kid.
And I'd be fine with Malachi. I'd be fine with Malachi too. Obviously only at 6'4". That's not quite the small forward size you need defending Kevin Durant every night, defending LeBron James every night. The Giannis's, those kinds of things. But he's a 3-and-D guy, shot over 50% from the field and 42% from 3 as a freshman in the Big Ten. I don't see for his size. There's been a lot of criticism of his defense. I just don't see as a guy I watched a lot in person. Went to 3 games this year, and as I've seen, on TV and stuff too. But again, it's all to scale in different leagues, and when you get to the association, things are different. People got to project what they think they're going to project out of him. But I would be perfectly fine with Malachi Branham in there as well too. And then you figure out, hey, is this a Jekyll and Hyde thing with Isaac Okoro where, hey, I need offense, here's Malachi. Hey, I need and not to detract from the defense, but Isaac is the best defender on the Cleveland Cavaliers in terms of wings. So that you interchange them and you do a sum of their parts type thing to the position. But Martin, I'm excited. We're over an hour, man, but a lot of ground to cover in the off season is well away. Tried to get back with listeners to recap draft and maybe some early free agency signings, including PJ Tucker apparently getting bank into his 40s. We'll see.
Yeah, so obviously when this episode comes out, the draft will be well over, so you will hear from us again, hearing our reviews on the draft, any surprises. There might be some trades during that, so there will be trades. Yeah, so be on the lookout for that. Also, we still have our podcast that we're going to do just about the Cleveland Cavaliers and a magical season, in my opinion, because no one expected us to be where we were at. So that's going to be coming up. We still got to schedule that. So be on the lookout for our draft review, our Cavs one, And then before you know it, we'll be talking about the season opener.
It'll be here before we know it.
And with that being said, thank you everyone for listening to the L7C podcast. Make sure you like, rate, comment, subscribe, and everyone take care. Thank you for listening to this episode of the L7C podcast. Be sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on all social media platforms, and we'll be talking to you guys soon. Take care.